Lord's Day Live, Basic Bible, and me and Mr. Hillbilly Harry. Harry Hillbilly, Hillbilly Harry, whichever one you want to do. That's who he is. See his little straw coming out? Ha, ha. There you go. Glad to have you. Thank you for being here. Here we go. Are you ready? Okay. Well, I hope you are, because we're going to knock, knock. Knock, knock. Who's there? Manatee. Manatee who? Manatee will be better than a sweater today. Man, a t-shirt, a tee, manatee would be better. I don't know what the weather is in your neck of the woods, but it's been wonderful here in Northeast Arkansas. And that's right, man, a tee would be better today than this old long sleeve shirt because, wasn't that funny? I thought it was. Okay, here we go. Segment number uno. Do the doodle. Remember, we are zeroing in on this little landmass right here beside the Mediterranean Sea, just to the east. And this is Israel. A little sliver of land that is in there that people have fought over for years and years, but God promised it to his people. And there it is right there. I've been there. I've crossed over the Jordan River, which we'll talk about here today. And I've seen this particular area. It's not nearly as beautiful as it was back in the day. But Israel is right there, and that's what we're dealing with. And as you might recall, we're trying to point out 7 landmarks in Israel that's very important for you to remember. Okay, and so let's just recall the poem, and that'll help us to go back there. Now, today you're going to be asked in the test time. You're going to be asked to quote both of these verses. So let me just put it in your head. You might want to go ahead and get her in there. You know what I'm saying? One balloon rising high. That, of course, is the Sea of Galilee. One balloon cannot fly. That's the Dead Sea. In between, Jordan flows. We're going to talk about that today. She's snaking down as she goes. At the top of Dead Sea, boom. Move your pen left with me. Slightly west, make a dot, which we did. Temple built on this spot. Of course, that's Jerusalem, okay? And if you can remember, there would actually be 4 of these lines, I guess. 4, what do you call them? Verses. 4 verses of this particular poem. And once you've got them all memorized, it'll help you to get these 7 landmarks onto your map. All right. Now, let's do this one more time. I'm going to have to say goodbye to Hillbilly Harry, but that's okay because I really, really want to make sure that I review this with you so that you do not forget. All right. First thing you got to do is just put your Mediterranean Sea. Just a bloop. You can do that, right? All right. Then somewhere down towards, the bottom, you put that Sea of Galilee, Jordan River, Dead Sea. Okay. Top of Dead Sea, slightly in. Below Sea of Galilee, slightly in. Halfway in between, another dot. You do that, and you're going to have basically 7 landmarks in the country of Israel that is going to help you as you place other things. In fact, today we're going to talk about a landmark that these 7 will help us to find. Okay. But anyhow, there you go. Moving on. Yes, we are into number 3, the third landmark. The first one was the Sea of Galilee. The second one was, the first one was the Mediterranean Sea. The second one is the Sea of Galilee. Third one is the Jordan River that snakes between. And as you know, each time I'm trying to give you either an Old Testament reference or a New Testament reference. Well, here's a New Testament reference that helps us to know that the Jordan River is actually biblical. These things took place in Bethany across the Jordan where John was baptizing, okay? And so what that does is it helps us to find the Jordan River, and it helps us to understand that this is the area in which John was baptizing. And it's somewhere about halfway up, maybe a little further up, and maybe at the top of that bubble, somewhere in that. But that's the area that he was baptizing in. All right, and that helps us to be able to, now if I know where the Jordan River is, where is this place that John was baptizing? And then you'll be able to find it on your own geographical maps. See what I'm saying? Hi, Mom. Thanks for watching. Glad to have you with me. All right, there you go. Land of Israel. Let's see. I think we did everything. Oh, yeah. Don't forget. We are now doing a crossword puzzle. All right. And you might recall we've talked about these 2 things. Last time was, what group of animals went down into the Sea of Galilee. Well, number 3 is where we're at today. 3 across. The Jordan River parted when what group of men stepped into it? Now, I gave you that last week, so probably most of you have already figured this one out. But if you haven't, now's the time to get after it. All right. Let us do the doodle with the book of Acts, because you guys have been just crazy good. Remember what we're doing? We're taking silly pictures, and these pictures will incorporate the number of the chapter. And in the silly picture, it's supposed to put something in your brain, a little hook in your brain where you can hang that theme of that chapter on that hook and say, every time I need to go back there, oh yeah, what was Acts chapter 7? I'll just pull that right out of the air. Acts chapter 7. Just go ahead and shout it out at me. Acts 7. What happened in Acts chapter 7? 7 sounds like Stephen. Yeah, Stephen's sermon and his stoning was in Acts chapter 7. See how smart you are? Well, today we are going to deal with Acts chapter 15. Got a smudge on my glasses, so I'm going to take care of that. Acts chapter 15 and Acts chapter 16. Acts 16 is one of my favorites. I love Acts 16. Acts 10, I love Cornelius, but anyhow, 16 is pretty good too. All right, if you'll write out the word Gentiles, and you'll notice that the L and the S kind of look like a 15. Something in Acts 15 is going to talk about the Gentiles, and I'm going to just kind of summarize for you here in just a little bit. We're going to go into the text, etc., and show you what's happening. But just for now, remember, the Gentiles do not have to be circumcised. That is the theme of Acts chapter 15. The Gentiles do not have to be circumcised. We'll talk about that later as we pick apart the passage, but that's the theme. Gentiles do not have to be circumcised, okay? Acts chapter 16, that cute little guy standing there, he's in jail, though. Anyhow, this is the Philippian jailers baptized. That could be Paul, or it could be Silas, either one of them. I probably could have put another guy there, but if I had, then it wouldn't be a 16. Can you guys see the 16? I love this one. See, here's the 1, and then here's the 6 right around his head there. Isn't that cute? I know. Anyhow, Philippian jailer is going to be baptized in Acts chapter 16, so you need to remember that, okay? Now, let's go back to our Badoo-Bada-Hoodle. All right, you guys got it? Now we're going to Badoodle it, all right? I'm having trouble with my eraser. All right. We're not even going to do Gentiles. You can do that one. That's a real easy one, okay? But let's go ahead and do let's go ahead and we'll put them in a thing here, and you can do your bricks later. If you want to do bricks, what you do is do your line of bricks, and then the next brick is in between, okay? See what I'm saying? And then the next one goes like this, and that way it makes it offset. Those look like sandbags, but anyhow, this is, and so there you go. You just fill them all in, okay? So there he's, okay. Now, we're putting him in jail. All right, here's your first bar in the jail. That's the 1, okay? Now get you a second bar in the jail. This is going to be the 6. Now you need to draw the little guy here, but we're going to put a smiley face on him, and I'll tell you why. Well, I'll tell you when we get to the passage. He's smiling in jail. How odd is that? He's smiling in jail, okay? There you go. And of course, if you want to get real fancy, you could kind of color this in. See how I'm doing that? And that looks like it's darkness back there behind him in the jail cell, because it was dark when he was in there. Isn't that cool? Okay, there you go. That's 16. Put your hangamajigger right there, and we move right along. Okay, so 15, the Gentiles do not have to be circumcised. 16, Philippian jailer is going to be baptized. Okay? Or as the little guy said, baptized. There's no P in that, but well, yeah, there is. B-A-P. There's no R. That's what it is. Anyhow, test prep. I would like for you on this particular test, notice I've got it in bold letters. What is the first and second verses of the poem that we are learning? So you got to have both of them, okay? What's the third major geographical location that snakes down between the Sea of Galilee and the Dead Sea? You got it. And can you draw the chapter clues? Here's one little cute one that we did right together there, and everybody's so... Okay, moving on. Let's have a moment of brevity. Does God laugh? Yes, he does. Silly sayings, they are hard work. That's not what it says, Sonny. I'm going to read this again, okay? Because I do believe that God laughs at, and he likes to laugh with us, okay? They say hard work never hurt anyone. But why take the chance? I'm with that lady. I'm not even going to risk it. She's still in bed. It's probably noon and she's still sleeping. What's with that? All right, segment number 2. We are going to make a memory. Memory. Gonna make a memory with you. All right, you guys have done so well. Here's all the chapters that you have learned so far. Remember, the first 12 chapters are basically dominated by Peter, okay? And I'm not going to go back through them, but you see all of that, all right? That's Peter. Where we're at, though, is we're into the second half of the book of Acts, and it's dominated by Paul. Back here in chapter 13, he's still called Saul. He and Barnabas are going to go on their first missionary journey, but shortly thereafter, his name will change to Paul. All right, remember first missionary journey. What happened in 14? 2 times 7. What happened in 7? We already talked about it. Stephen is stoned. What happened in 14? Paul is stoned. Brownie point, can you tell me what city he was stoned in? Lystra. Yeah, Lystra. You know how I remember that? I don't know why, but I always think of Listerine. You know, the mouthwash stuff. It's not Listerine. It's Lystra. So Paul was stoned in Listerine. No, he was stoned in Lystra. All right, here's today. Gentiles do not have to be circumcised. See the 15. And what's this one? Philippian jailer is going to be baptized. See how good you guys are? All right. Making a memory, moving into the memory verse segment of our time together. In Acts chapter 15, verse 1, we got this memory verse. But some men came down from Judea and were teaching the brothers, unless you were circumcised according to the custom of Moses, you cannot be saved. Remember how we do that? Say each line 5 times. And you do that, and it will not only drive your parents crazy, but it will also get it stuck in your brain. And you can do the same thing with Acts chapter 16 here. And he took them the same hour and night, got in, and they baptized them, okay? So say it over and over 5 times. If you'll do that 5 times, and especially if you do that every day. If every day you repeat it 5 times, and then you do this part where you leave out blanks, I guarantee you by the time you get to the test, you're going to have this sucker. All right. There's 15 and 1, there's 16. You see it. And so you leave out and you fill them in. I mean, how much easier can it be? Test. So if I were going to test you in segment number 2, I would ask you, what are the major topics of these chapters? Chapter 15. Can you tell me? 15. Chapter 16. It's right there. Can you tell me? And can you quote the memory verses right out of the Bible? That'd be good, because there is nothing better to do than put God's word in your mind. I mean, think about that. Oh, let's be silly again. Just let's do it. Question. Why did the man become an archaeologist? Now, for those of you who are younger and not sure exactly what that big word means, like myself, I'm going to tell you. An archaeologist is a guy who digs around in the dirt, and he looks for bones, and he looks for artifacts, and he looks for things that would show him information about the past. Okay? My mom's not really an archaeologist, but she loves to dig around in the past. She's more of a genealogist. You know what that is? That's somebody who looks in the past at where your ancestors came from and who you are and all that kind of stuff. And it's kind of fascinating, the stuff that she's found out. But this guy digs in the dirt. All right, now back to our joke. Why did the man become an archaeologist? Well, I'll tell you. It was because his career was in ruins. Get it? Ruins. That's where he goes to dig. He digs in the ruins to find the old bones and stuff. Yeah. Okay. Segment number trace. Ponder a passage. So we will be pondering this particular passage, and it comes from Acts chapter 15. And you'll notice I kind of skipped around in the context because I wanted to get I wanted to give you a complete thought here. But some men, let's just scoot over here. But some men came down from Judea, and were teaching the brothers, unless you are circumcised according to the custom of Moses, you cannot be saved. Now, I'm not going to go into a deep discussion about circumcision. Your parents can talk to you about that if they want to, but circumcision was a religious rite. It was a surgery that boys would go through, and men also, but primarily boys, and it would signify that they then were sealed in a covenant with God. Okay. And that was an Old Testament process. It started all the way back there with Abraham. And it was symbolizing that they had sealed themselves in this covenant with God. Well, when Jesus came, that covenant was sealed by him and his blood. Okay. And so our circumcision actually happens in baptism. And baptism is where, according to the book of Colossians, is where Jesus himself circumcises the sin from our life, the surgery of taking the sin out of our life. But there were some folks, after the church began, back in the first century, there were some folks who were saying, if you want to become a Christian, you got to become a Jew first. That was basically what they're saying. You got to get circumcised. And so they had a big meeting. And Paul and Silas, Paul and Barnabas, they're going to be debating these guys. And eventually they decide, let's go down to Jerusalem, talk to the apostles and the elders and figure this thing out. Okay? And that's what's going to happen. Verse 2, and after Paul and Barnabas had no small discussion and debate with them, Paul and Barnabas and some others were appointed to go up to Jerusalem with the apostles and the elders about this question. And so the second thing I want you to notice was this idea of debating. Yes, it is very biblical to debate. Now, there are certain rules that are going to apply that we need to do with kindness, all of those kind of things. In fact, on your test question, I'm going to ask you to write a little series of 3 questions. There are 3 principles, 3 rules that should govern our debating if we debate the Bible. Okay, there goes a wasper flying right over there. There he is right there. You can't see him because he's over there. Anyhow, and so what's going to happen, I'm going to tell you the rest of the story. And so Paul and Barnabas are going to be sent down to Jerusalem. When they get down there to Jerusalem, there's going to be a lot of discussion, and they're going to think about this, and then eventually they're going to make the decision that no, the Gentiles do not have to be baptized. Excuse me. The Gentiles do not have to be circumcised in order to be saved. They do have to be baptized. I'm going to have to kill that wasper. So if you hear something violent, that is Sonny Childs getting stung. You won't be still. Oh, if you could just see my heroicness. Just land, little wasper, and I will take care of you and send you off to meet the maker. He won't land. I can't do it because he won't land. He's just going to torment me this entire time. Are you guys still with me? Did anybody leave me yet? There he is. Can you guys see him? I got him. Watch it. Well, there he is. Can you see him? There he is, right there. Oh my. See, I was afraid he might just go ahead and that would have ruined the day. My head might have swelled up like my hillbilly Harry over there. Anyhow, we got to move on. So you got that? That's Acts chapter 15. Gentiles do not have to be circumcised. Now, we got to move on. I'm running out of time. Now, we also need to deal with this particular passage because we're taking 2 at a time, remember? In Acts chapter 16, what's going to happen is Paul's going to go on a missionary journey. And I wanted to show you on the map where he went. Now, remember, this is basically the headquarters. This is where Paul and Barnabas kind of leave out at Antioch, okay? Jerusalem is also a very important place, and they were just there last chapter, remember? Okay, but now he's going to go on another missionary journey. He's going to be all the way over here in Philippi. Now, he's picked up a different partner at this point. He's no longer working with Barnabas. Now he's working with a guy named Silas. And they're going to do a really good deed. They're going to help a young lady who is possessed, etc. And anyhow, he's going to get him in trouble. And another guy doing a good thing gets in trouble. What kind of world do they have? Kind of like ours. Yeah. But anyhow, about midnight, after being put in jail because they did a good thing, about midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God. Isn't that cool? They have been beat. They have been unjustly put in jail. And now they're still praising God. Can you do that? Sometimes I can. Sometimes I'm not mature enough. Anyhow, there's a great earthquake. The whole thing's going to shake. And the doors are going to flop open. And it says, when the jailer woke and he saw that the prison doors were open, he drew his sword and was about to kill himself. You know why? Because that jailer was in charge of those prisoners. And if anybody escaped, he paid for it with his own life. And the way they killed, it wasn't good. And so he was going to kill himself. I don't want to go through all that torture and whatever. And so he was about to kill himself. But Paul is going to cry out, don't do that. Don't harm yourself. We're still here. Then he says he brought them out and he said to them, sirs, what must I do to be saved? The jailer says to Paul and Silas, I want what you got. I want to be able to sing and pray and praise God at midnight, even after people have done me wrong. I want what you got. And so he's going to get baptized. Really, really great story. Moms and dads need to read the whole thing because it's really, really heroic. Okay. But I thought it might be fun for you and I to do another Doodle later. And we're going to have to say goodbye to Paul as he's here in the jail cell. But this time, let's draw a sword, okay? I thought, how do you doodle a sword? Get out of the way, Sonny. Okay, how do you doodle a sword? Swords aren't really that hard, okay? You just kind of, I'll just do it. Okay, come up here to a point like that, kind of half, just an arc. It's not really a half circle, it's more of an arc. And then bring it back, but leave this part open, okay? Here's where we're going to put that little hand guard thing, that keeps our hands from getting, and then give it okay, and then you might want to wrap it in tape or something like that, okay? Big old sword. Now, you can put a little shine mark at the end, or better yet, put it right here on the blade. That means that sucker's sharp. Okay, so there you go. There's a sword. And that's the sword that the Philippian jailer was going to kill himself with because he thought all of his folks had escaped, but they hadn't escaped. And so he didn't. And he was baptized, him and his whole household. And so what we have is the first house church in Philippi is started by Paul and Silas and this Philippian guy, a Philippian jailer guy. How cool is that? And there are going to be others. You can read about them in the Bible. There are going to be others that are going to be a part of that. Really, really neat story. All right. If I was going to test you, the test in segment number 3 would be these 5 questions. So perhaps you should take a screenshot so that you can have them and be ready for the final test. Time for a silly. Remember, Ecclesiastes 3 and 4. Read it for yourself. There is a time to laugh. We do a lot of that, don't we? What do the traffic lights say to the cars? Now, this might be a little embarrassing, and so if you're young, you might want to cast your eyes the other direction. What did the traffic lights say to the cars? Don't look, I'm changing. Get it? Changing from red to green. I'm changing. Not changing his clothes. He's changing colors. Don't look, I'm changing. You ever done that? Run into the bedroom and shut the door? Don't look, I got to change my clothes. Segment number 4. Apply the why. Why do we even want to talk about this stuff? Well, let's doodle again. We've been doing a lot of doodles. But anyhow, you like to doodle, so get out your thing. All right, here we go. One more doodle. I thought this time we just draw a face. You can do it anyway. Make sure you got a nose. Okay, come down and give the guy some lips. Give him a chin, and then a neck. Can you do that? All right, let's give the guy an eyeball. Everybody needs an eyeball. You want to give him hair? Okay, there you go. But we need to do bubbles. And then a big bubble. Because he's thinking, why? Why? Why is this passage important to us? And that is what apply the why is all about. Now, applying the why, we will go to this passage, and I will get myself out of the way. And first thing that I wanted to do as far as making it come alive for you is I want to talk about this idea of debate. You ever been in a debate with somebody? You ever been in a debate over a biblical topic with somebody? It's biblical to have a biblical debate. They did that in the Bible. But there are some rules, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. If you've ever been in a debate, you know that sometimes it can get a little heated, can't it? Can you think of any rules that Christians should apply to debating? Or is there certain things that we should not do? Because, debating is a lot like arguing. Not necessarily the same, or at least doesn't have to be the same. But debating is when you've got a position, they've got a position, and you're trying to reason it out. Whose position is better? Whose position is more likely? Okay, that's what happened back in Acts chapter 15. Remember, the fellows are coming from Judea, and they're trying to convince people that Gentiles have to be circumcised before they can become a Christian. And Paul and Barnabas say, no, I don't think so. Then they go down to Jerusalem, and no, they don't. So, but there was a debate that was going on. What are some rules? That's going to be a question you're going to have on your test. What are some rules that we should have for debating? Then the other passage was Acts 16, as you remember. And Paul and Silas, they were praying and singing hymns at midnight. Have you ever stayed over at somebody's house and maybe stayed up really, really late? Maybe you had one of those lock-ins, and they stay up all night, whatever. Did you sing and pray at midnight? I've done that. It's really cool. Of course, you're really kind of tired at that particular point. especially if you're an old man like me. You know, you're kind of tired, you're kind of sleepy and all those kind of things, but it's really neat to pray and sing at midnight, especially when you know that the early Christians often did that, evidently, and certainly Paul and Silas did it in our passage. But how hard do you think it would have been to praise God after being imprisoned and beaten for doing a good thing? See, that's the hard part of this passage is, you know, it's one thing to stay up late, you know, to sleep over or whatever and say, let's have a little devotional. That's really nice. I want you to do that. But can you imagine being beaten and put in jail? You're hurting, you're sore, you're tired, you're discouraged perhaps because here I am in jail, and yet you still can praise God. I want to have that kind of spiritual maturity. How about you? All right. Here's the test question that I've been telling you about. Be prepared to make a list of 3 rules that we should use when debating the Bible. What are 3 rules that you think are very important for Christians to observe when debating the Bible? Our last moment of laughter. And here is the question. How do they answer the phone at a paint shop? Can you imagine? If you were to call up a paint shop and I was the paint shop and I answered the phone, what might I say? If you said, ringy dingy, I might say, hello? Get it? Hello? But I'm in a paint shop, so we might as well say, yellow. Sometimes I laugh at myself. Okay. Well, what do? You just keep laughing. The 5th segment is test time. But wait, we need to do our crossword puzzle. 3 across? Did you get it? The Jordan River parted when what group of men stepped in? The priests. That's right. They were carrying the Ark of the Covenant as they were going into the Promised Land. And the minute their feet touched the water, it says that the whoosh. And the thing that's interesting about that is their moms and dads and such had seen the same thing back down there at the Red Sea when they came out of Egypt. All right. So the priests. There you go. Now, as I recall, next time we're going to do this one. 4 letters, 4 down. Besides the Dead Sea, the Bible often calls it what other sea? The Dead Sea is also called what? And it starts with an S. Most of you have probably already guessed that one, but that will be next time. Here's your test questions. We're in number 8, test 8. Can you believe it? Moms and dads and whoever else is out there, take you a snapshot of that thing. And there we go. There are the questions. Man, I appreciate you for being with me. Please, if you felt that this was helpful, and would you pray for us? And if you can, support us with your financial givings. That would mean a lot to me. Sonny Chow saying, be there. I mean it. Please be there. Matthew 16:26. Moving into prayer time. A lot needs to be prayed about. Obviously, Russia and Ukraine, all of these were up last week. I wanted to show you another picture of my son and his mentor, Daryl, as they are pouring some cement steps. They are down there in Honduras, and he's supposed to come home this week, and we can't hardly wait. He's been gone for 2 months. We can't hardly wait to be with him. But you can see kind of crude steps, but some folks have had to make their way up the mountain without the aid of that. It gets wet and slippery, but now they're going to have steps, and Gabriel has worked really hard to help make that happen. Please be praying for all of these things on the list. If you've got a prayer request, go ahead and type it in right now. And everybody who watches this as a recording or perhaps is watching it now live, they will be able to pray for whatever your request is. Okay, so go ahead and type it in. While you do that, I'm going to get a drink because I'm thirsty. Hardly anything better than water. All right, here we go. Ready? Lord's Day Live. I'm so very, very grateful that so many of you join me for Lord's Day Live, whether it be live or as a recording. It just means the world to me to know that you're with me, studying the Bible with me, and that God is doing good things among us. A lot of things to be praying about in our world, and so please continue to make sure that you have them on your prayer list, especially Ukraine, Russia, what's going on over there. Please be praying. This is the last of the first series that will fall under this title, Real-Time Christianity. This is the 8th part of a very important series in which we're trying to give you some practical principles for Christian living. That series that we are completing today is entitled Giving Up Our Foreign Wives, Steps to Overcoming Adultery with the World. And the final thing that we want to talk about is what if? I want to try to wrap this 8-part series together with a very sobering application. What if? You know, our world stands on the edge of a nuclear holocaust, literally. And my question for you is, what if? It's not just that, but there's all kinds of other threats that are going on. Various countries around the world, cyber terrorism has become a big thing. And although you say to yourself, well, we can live without the internet, or we can live, yeah, that's true. But cyber terrorism is not just about the internet. It's about using things such as that to shut down perhaps the electronic grid. What would you do if all of a sudden America went dark and we didn't have any electricity? Think about what would be affected by your lack of electricity. I've been thinking about that. I couldn't get water. Well, I could because I own a generator, but I'd have to go out and rewire my well in order to get water from my well. When people stop having water, things really get bad. Riots occur, et cetera, et cetera. Food's important, but water, you got to have water. What is it? You can go, I don't know, well, Jesus went 40 days without food, but you can't go more than 3 days, I'm told, 3 or so without water. You got to have water. So what could happen? What if? And it's very reasonable that this could come about, because what we're seeing in our world today, and those who are attacking others and invading countries, and it's very possible this could happen within our lifetime, within the year. So what if? And so as I conclude this idea, let's step over. As I conclude this idea of giving up our foreign wives, overcoming adultery with the world, I want to suggest to you that there's never been a time, at least in your existence, there's never been a time when it has been more urgent and more poignant for you to make the right decisions and ask yourself the what ifs. If you're a part of the School of Biblical Studies, here are the 5 questions that we'll be addressing in this sermon. But if you're not part of the School of Biblical Studies, you can still obviously use them for your own personal spiritual growth, and I hope that you will. And I hope that you'll consider being part of the School of Biblical Studies. I'm not going to go and review this too much because I got so much to say, but we've done it already every time, and these are the 3 passages that we've used to lay the foundation for this series, in that we have got to be a people who gives up that which anchors us. That's what this chain has been about throughout the series, that which anchors us to this world. We've got to lift anchor. We've got to put away those things that are causing us to want to stay here. The bucket list, it's very humanistic in its nature. We have got to fill our bucket. If you're going to fill it with anything, fill your bucket with the fact that I want to go and be with Jesus. That's the one thing in my bucket. My bucket list has one item. I want to go to be with the Lord. If you can ever get your family to that point, get yourself to that point first, but then get your family to that point, even if this were to occur, it would be okay, because we're all going to be with the Lord. You know what I'm saying? And so it's very, very important that we lift anchor, that we not be adulterous people. All right, in dealing with this what if this were to happen? I want to travel through a discussion about the end of the world. First of all, I want to address the question, when will the world end? Now, I posted this yesterday, and there were several folks who were kind of, they were doing I guess, almost a smart aleck thing. Nobody knows when the world ends. Obviously, the Bible tells us that, okay? I get that. But what the Bible does say is that, number one, no man knows when the Lord's going to return. But number two, every man can know the circumstances that will surround the time in which the Lord will return. Because God's a consistent God, and God throughout biblical history, if you just study it, he has told us a lot about the season. I may not know the hour, but I can know the season in which the Lord will return. And there are 2 primary characteristics about that season that God consistently has shown throughout history that you and I can understand and apply them to our present day. And we can know whether or not we are in the season. And by the way, I'm confident we are. I don't know that this will be the season, but we are definitely within the season of human history in which the Lord could come back. Genesis chapter 6 and verse 5, the Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on the earth, and every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. The first thing that God does when determining when he will bring judgment down upon the world, the first thing that he does is that he considers the saturation of evil, the saturation point of that which is wicked. This, of course, is talking about Noah and the time that the flood is going to come on the earth. Okay, and every inclination, they were thinking thoughts that were evil all the time. And so God says, I'm going to have to bring judgment down upon the earth. But my point is, the saturation is one of the characteristics God uses when determining whether or not it's time to bring judgment, whether or not they're in the season of judgment. Another passage, and you skip just a few chapters into the book of Genesis, in the fourth generation, your descendants will come back here. I believe speaking to Abraham here. And he's talking about the promised land. And he's saying your generation can come back. They're going to take over the promised land, but not until something happens. Specifically, that the sin of the Amorites reaches its full measure. Because he says until then, evidently God's just nature would not allow him to bring that about. And so, again, you see the saturation point of wickedness. Once the world gets to a place where it has become so saturated by sin that God judges that it's not worth me trying to save it any longer, he then is going to destroy those people. Okay? And so, understanding that, you can put in the bank, if you will, the first characteristic of evil within the world that could bring about the return of Jesus is the saturation point of evil. So, how are we doing in the world? Are we saturated? Well, I suggest to you that by most standards, America is the flagship of righteousness. We're the cream of the crop. There's more preachers and churches and all of those kind of things, money flowing into religious activities, etc., in America than I think any place else in the world. And so by many standards, we are the leader as far as righteousness is concerned. So how righteous is America? This meme has been going around Facebook and other social media outlets, and I thought it was pretty powerful. So, Lord, I was wondering, how come you're not blessing America as much as you did before? And she just responds, 60 million aborted babies, same-sex marriage, sexual perversion, adultery, murder, drunkenness, lies, selfishness, rejection of God. Shall I continue? Jesus says, yes, I believe that America has reached perhaps a saturation point that could usher in the return of Jesus. Especially now when you consider that if America is the flagship of righteousness, if we're the cream of the crop, if we're as good as it gets, and this is how pitiful we look, yeah, wickedness probably has reached a saturation point in the world that could lead, buried down here behind the picture, but that could lead to something such as the end of the world. But there is a second thing that God often uses in his list of criteria as to when to bring judgment. He's done it consistently throughout Scripture, and we'll use this second one to also apply to America and the world today. The second thing is just statistics, saturation and statistics. You remember the story in Genesis chapter 18 when the Lord is talking with Abraham, and he's talking about going down there and looking and seeing if Sodom and Gomorrah were as bad as they really as it seems. Well, let's just let the Lord explain it. Then the Lord said, the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is so great and their sin is so grievous that I will go down there and see if what they have done is as bad as the outcry that has reached me. Pause for a moment. Notice this idea of an outcry. It comes twice. The outcry, the outcry. Who's crying out? Perhaps it's the blood of the innocent people. Perhaps it's righteous people who are completely, upset by what's going on about them. That seems to be the indication of Lot, who's living in Sodom, that he was very, very concerned about all the unrighteousness that was around about him. And yet he makes a very foolish choice to actually plant himself in the middle of Sodom to the point that he's become a leader, not unlike many Christians today, who instead of separating themselves from the world, they actually put and invest the majority of the waking hours of little Johnny and Susie are given over to the world in the public school system. Yeah, we're just like these folks. And the outcry is going up before God. These are wicked people down here. People are suffering, dear God. But continue to read. So God says, I'm going to go down there and I'm going to check it out. Then it says, then Abraham approached him and he said, will you sweep away the righteous with the wicked? What if there are 50 righteous people in the city? And so Abraham is going to begin this journey of statistics. He's going to say, but Lord, if there's 50 people in the city who are righteous, surely that's enough people to preserve it, to keep it going. Notice the statistical argument that is being made here. And notice also, if you continue in the context, that God gives into that. He says, yes, you're right. Statistically speaking, if there are at least 50 people proportionally to the rest of the population that are righteous, that's enough for me to spare the city. And you might recall that he's going to finagle all the way down to 10. And God can't even find 10 righteous people in the city. Remember? He only finds 4, and I'm not even sure the one is really all that righteous. Well, I'm not sure all 4 are very righteous, but remember Mrs. Lot, she gets turned into a pillar of salt as she leaves the city because she can't even keep her eyes off the city. Much like people today who I've got to have my kids socialized in the school system, and I've got to have all the accolades from the world, and I've got to, just can't keep their eyes off of it. They're drawn and lured into it. Well, that's what happened to Mrs. Lot. Then the 3 of them do escape. They go to the mountains, and you remember what happens to Lot and his 2 daughters and the sexual perversion that took place there? Oh, yeah. Yeah, I wonder where they learned that. They learned it down there in the city where mom and dad had put them right there in the middle of it all. No wonder we're losing our kids to the world today. Pay attention, parents. It's an age-old problem, and we're duplicating it today in our own situation. So my question is, could this happen? Absolutely. We're duplicating the Sodom and Gomorrah thing as we speak. And yet we continue to invest so much of our time into the accolades of the world. So much of our priorities are invested in the accolades of the world. Anyhow, when will the world end? When it hits a saturation point that God says enough's enough. Statistically speaking, he's saying it's not worth me saving anymore. We know that there's only going to be a handful of remnants that's going to be saved, and God is going to bring his judgment. Number 2, I want to ask the question, how will the world end? How will it end? We actually have quite a bit of information with regards to this. 2 Peter 3:10 and following, the day of the Lord will come like a thief. So it's going to come without expectations, at least by most. The heavens will disappear with a roar. The elements will be destroyed by fire, and the earth and everything done in it will be laid bare. Does that sound anything like an atomic blast to you? Since everything will be destroyed in this way, what kind of people ought we to be? We ought to live holy and godly lives and look forward to the day that God, takes care of us and takes us into a new heaven and a new earth. The hardest question I've ever been asked by a Calvinist is something of this nature. If God knows that we will be lost, why does he continue to bring us into the world? It's a tough one. If God knows, for instance, that this little baby is going to be born, but this little baby is going to grow up to become a horrible person, and they're going to be lost forever, and why does he even let the little baby be born? And I'm not sure that I can definitively answer the question, but I would like to say that this is my reasoning of it, at least to this point. I think it's perhaps because his just nature is waiting basically for us to destroy ourselves. Consider this. I think that in many ways, God made a covenant with humanity when he brought us into the world. That covenant is sealed by the fact that you and I have his nature, that he's created us. And by the way, that nature did not just it didn't end when Adam and Eve sinned. All right. We are told that we continue to be created in his image. 1 Corinthians, I think it's chapter 11, actually talks about that the image of God continues to persist within mankind. And so we have the image of God within us. And I believe that there's somewhat of a contract that was made, a covenant that was made between God and man at that point. And part of that covenant is basically a free will, a direction of your own destiny. And I believe that God is willing to allow that to govern our realm because he gave part of himself into our realm. If that's the case, then in many ways, what we are seeing play out is just an unspiraling of self-destruction. That we are just becoming more and more self-destructive to a point that I think this could happen. Okay. Now, when this happens, it will be the judgment of God. When this happens, God will allow various things to take place and all of this kind of thing, that the destruction that is going to take place. I'm not suggesting that God himself is not bringing this about as far as judgment is concerned, but I'm wondering if it's not possible that the judgment that comes, and we've seen this consistently throughout Scripture and other places, that the judgment that comes is really brought about by their own stupid choices. And they basically self-destruct. How many nations throughout history have we seen that have done that? Is it possible that humanity itself is destined for a self-destruction? If that's the case, however, I want you to consider where we're at present tense. Right now, we are in a situation, a very, very dicey situation that could bring about nuclear war. A nuclear holocaust could envelop this particular planet. Yes, my friends, we are at a point where the world could end. I don't know. I can tell you what the season looks like. And I don't know if this is, I mean, back during the Second World War, there surely were a lot of people preaching sermons just like I'm preaching now. I get that. And there have been other times. Matthew 25, Jesus himself says that there will be wars and rumors of wars. And when that happens, pay attention. But the end is not yet. So I don't know. But I do know that what's coming on the horizon, it looks like the judgment of God. Whether it's the end of the world or not, it's the judgment of God. And when eventually it becomes the season, when the Lord says enough is enough, this is the type of thing that's going to happen. And it looks a lot like that. And we seem to be in a position to bring this about on ourselves. Third question I would ask is, will you be ready when the world does end? Matthew 25 that I referenced just a second ago is a powerful, powerful passage about the virgins, the 10 virgins. And you might recall that 5 are wise and 5 are foolish, and the bridegroom is delayed. Jesus is delayed. He hasn't come yet. And the bridegroom being delayed, they all got drowsy and they all fell asleep. So they're waiting, okay? But the difference between these two groups of women is this. 5 of them came prepared. They said, I don't care what it takes. I am going to make sure that I am prepared for when the bridegroom comes. And so they had enough oil. 5 of them were not prepared. I think this idea that they all were drowsy and slept is not that they weren't paying attention as much as it is that they didn't know the hour. I think that's largely what is being said here. They didn't know the hour that he was going to come. And so it wasn't unreasonable for them to sleep because they know how that the bridegroom is going to come. There's going to be a grand announcement. And so it wasn't unreasonable for them to sleep. What was unreasonable was for them not to be prepared. And 5 of them were not prepared. 5 of them just they didn't keep. And I'm going to suggest to you as I end this series that this series was all about you and I and us not keeping our focus. So the foolish virgins are going to wake up and they're going to say, please give us some oil because our lamps are going, we weren't prepared. And the other 5 are going to say, look, we only have enough for ourselves. I can't save you. You can't save me. All I can do is admonish you to check your lamp. Do you got the oil that you need? Are you focused in the direction you need to be focused? Have you prepared? Giving up our foreign wives, steps to overcoming adultery with the world. How far, my friends, how far would you go in order to be holy? So that when Christ comes, he sees you as a holy being, worthy of being part of the remnant because you have washed your robes in the blood of the Lamb. How far would you go? Well, here's the series that we just talked about. Would you go that far? Would you give up your priorities of pills and pokes and all the stuff that goes along with that? And doing your best to anchor yourself to this world by all the stuff that we inject into ourselves and trying to stay alive because this is the ultimate goal when it's not. It's to go to be with the Lord. How about the women who are abandoning their homes and sending little Johnny and Susie off to the public school system, who are abandoning the role that is specifically assigned to them in Titus 2, chapter 2, verses 4 through 5? How about men who are failing to actually be the spiritual leaders in their home and helping, making sacrifices, cutting the budget of all of the crazy conveniences and gluttonous materialism that we have so that our wives can stay home? How about abandoning our children to the world? Public school system, letting the world educate little Johnny and Susie for the majority of their waking hours during the week doesn't make any sense at all, spiritually speaking. Not a lick. Would we be willing to give up that foreign wife? How about unqualified elders who have led us to this point? On their watch, we have become what we are. And we're struggling and we're losing like 75% of our young people to the world upon graduation from high school. And many of them are never coming back. That's on their watch, those shepherds' watch. Have you been calling them on the carpet? Are you doing as Paul commanded Timothy, to publicly rebuke them if they refuse to repent of their sins. Will we give up that foreign life? How about our vanity buildings that sit empty for the majority of the week? You sit in your padded pew and you look up at your lofty vaulted ceiling and you see all the paraphernalia that surrounds the auditorium, and you recognize that at best 3 or 4 times a week that stuff gets used. The rest of the time it just gathers dust and echoes with silence off the walls. Will we be willing to give up that foreign life? And lastly, the distractions of this world that are anchoring us to this world. Would you be willing to give those up? How far would you go in order to make sure that you're part of the remnant, that you are holy, that you have washed your robe and it's ready, it's bright, it's white, ready for the return of Jesus? How far would you go? My friends, it's time. It's time, because if this happens, and I think it's likely to happen, if this happens and the Lord returns, he is looking for the faithful. He's not looking for the fickle. He's looking for those who have lifted anchor and are ready and willing to go. Are you part of that number? I thank you so very, very much for your support of my ministry. Because of you, I can preach hard sermons such as that. A lot of folks don't want to hear it. But what elderships and others have done to me over the years is they've removed their finances from me. They said, we're not going to be supporting you anymore because we don't like the way that you talk, the way that you challenge the church to do this, that, and the other. But you keep me alive. You allow me, in spite of elders that have been invaded by wolves that are feeding upon the flock, you keep me alive. And I thank you for letting me speak the hard truth. Please continue to support us, both with your finances and, most importantly, with your prayers. It is the Lord's Day. And the Lord's Day, we stop and remember the Lord. And I can't wait to have communion with my little home church. My family will be getting together. We're going to keep it simple, innocent, and meaningful. And Cindy's made us our homemade loaf for our communion. And it's going to be good, because we're going to stop and we're going to remember the power of the death, the burial, and the resurrection of Jesus. I pray that you'll do that as well. Thank you for joining me this morning. This is Sonny Childs, as always, saying, and I mean it, especially in these last days with the potential of a nuclear holocaust raging around about us, please make every effort to be there. Matthew 16:26.